This is KJ and Lyons. KJ Carson and Jon Lyons right now on WEEI.
In terms of the on-field performance, how much where did you expect to be at this point when you hired?
I think consistent with what we've been saying all along this year, we expected a team that would be in this thing and in a postseason contender. And unfortunately, we all know we fell short of that. It's an old cliche, we are in the results business, so results ultimately always matter.
Good Saturday to you, KJ and Lyons on WEEI, 617-779-7937. Text line 37937. Still to come, Chaim Bloom reflection and parodies, plus the Lions Den. Which chum from the Patriots and the Miami game go into the Lions Den? John, that's Red Sox President Sam Kennedy saying, look, we're in the results business, and that's why they had to make the move. And I say, this is what people have been saying for at least 2.5 years.
Yeah, and look, this was a polarizing start, really, to the Chaim Bloom tenure. You go back to, he trades Mookie Betts as really his first significant move, and it felt like ever since then there were two camps of people. The people that either wanted Mookie to be traded or were just going to defend Bloom and the whole analytics and farm system approach, and the people who hated that trade looked at the 2018 World Series team and said, hey, we want to be more like that. And those two camps got so ingrained, you can call it take committed if you want, but so ingrained in how they felt that nothing was going to change their mind really until this firing happened. I mean, you had a camp of people who said you're finishing in last place likely for the third time in 4 years. That's unacceptable. But then you had another camp of people who say, hey, our farm system is now fifth in the league and we're trying to build this sustainable contender. I think the reason that Chaim Bloom doesn't have a job anymore is those two camps really should have been working together all along, because the Boston Red Sox have the ability to build a good farm system while also spending and contending at the major league level, and they never really did that in his tenure. They had Game 6 of the ALCS in 2021.
You ever see the meme where there's the guy who's sweating and there's one button to push or the other button to push? Look, I think the Mookie Betts situation was something that you weren't going to get an answer for until the long term. It just happened to happen a couple of weeks ago as Mookie pretty much showed up with an aluminum bat and destroyed the Red Sox. But I think the bigger issues are the indecisions to push a button in other scenarios. Why is Nate Eovaldi not here? Why did you not get pitching?
Why didn't you re-sign Kyle Schwarber?
Right. All these other things that, okay, the Mookie thing, you were going to get a pass on that for a while because that was steeped in economics, right? The argument back at that point was like, there's no way you give him $35 million. He could be a declining player. Almost similar to the Brady argument, right? That, does Bill give Brady $25 million if he believes he has a declining asset? It was kind of the same with Mookie. So that was something that wasn't going to show up right away. But there were right away decisions that weren't being made that made the guy seem indecisive, and it started to show up in the field of play. Like, it got so bad that it started showing up in the defensive presence on the field. And my God, if you're not going to spend, you should have a great defensive team out there.
Yeah, you're right. You should. I mean, admit, I feel like defense is like the cheapest thing to have in the MLB. Like, if you're not going to spend on J.D. Martinez and Xander Bogaerts and Mookie Betts, at least not commit the most errors in the MLB for most of the year and have the worst fielding percentage in the MLB.
Yeah, so it's one of those things where you was it the later things that Chaim did, and it seemed like Mookie ended up being kind of like this bookend to it, right? Because I go back to the picture on, not picture as in thrower, but picture of Chaim Bloom and Alex Verdugo standing in the outfield having that conversation about 2-3 weeks ago, right? And the thing that I took away from that picture is, here's the guy with his guy, right? And these are the two guys who are most affected by what just happened that weekend when Mookie Betts came back, right? Like, Verdugo is the guy that's been, let's just call it what it is, somewhat there's been some headbutting going on inside the dugout. And we were having a conversation, I think maybe a week and a half, 2 weeks ago, we asked, who's more likely to be here next year, Chaim or Alex Cora? And we got the answer this week.
Right, and I think going back to my original point, the Red Sox should always have the ability to build a farm system, yes, but consistently contend at the major league level, and that was the problem. Like, yeah, you are building the farm system, and you do have good young players in your organization. Not real many good young pitchers, by the way, outside of Brian Bayo, which is a big concern. But they were building the farm system, but they weren't really contending. Like, you look at the on-field product at the major league level, we're in year 4, and we can only be happy with one of those 4 years. Like, look at the Reds. Like, John Henry and his ownership group do deserve blame for this because they were not willing to spend as much in the past. But even look in the past, right? The previous World Series championships they won, they were always top 5 in payroll, so they would spend, but they also still had good homegrown players on those teams. Like, the Red Sox should be able to do both, and it felt like during this whole Bloom tenure, they only did one, which was the farm system. They never invested enough in building that major league roster, whether it was trading Mookie Betts, letting guys like Bogarts, Martinez, and Evaldi go, but also not really replacing them. Right, like you bring in Yoshida, which I think is a great signing. They brought in some bullpen arms in Jansen and Martin, which I think were great signings. But, I mean, we went through multiple years where they didn't have a legitimate first baseman and a legitimate second baseman, and they had holes in their outfield for multiple years.
There was always a hole in the boat, and Chaim could never patch it up.
And look, I'm not saying
or
1
maybe,
through 9.
Or maybe
you have to
you're
be elite,
punching holes into the boat, right? Because it's one thing to grow. You mentioned with the farm system, Devers farm system.
Bogarts
Xander,
was, Betts was, like
right,
Vasquez was, like all farm system guys.
Right, so if you're going to chop those things of corn, you better be getting something major in return. Nothing major in return, sometimes nothing at all, has come back in return for things that you grew yourself. So whether you're a farmer or you're running a team that has a farm system, you can't be giving up crops for nothing or getting bad crops or unproducing crops in return.
But then the other issue, though, KJ, is that he holds on to these crops so much that the ones that are like dying out, he still says, "Oh, we've got life in them."
Yeah, but you only have one of those. You only have one of those ears of corn left, and that's Devers.
And I think the issue too, KJ, is I can't really think of a point, except for maybe the Yoshida signing, in his entire tenure where Bloom was aggressive on something. And I'm not saying you got to be aggressive all the time, but you think back to this trade deadline, they weren't aggressive at all. Last trade deadline, they weren't aggressive at all.
2021, they weren't. 2021,
yes, they got Kyle Schwarber, and I know it worked out, but that was still the bargain brand Anthony Rizzo because Schwarber was hurt at the time. Like, they still weren't aggressive then. 2020, they weren't aggressive.
Worse than anything.
Yeah, and then you go to the off seasons, like Kyle Schwarber has a great run for you. You don't re-sign him. You let Evaldi go. You're not aggressive in getting starting pitching. You're not aggressive in filling the holes left by guys like Mookie Betts and Xander Bogaerts. Like, even the Bogaerts thing, like, first of all, they could have been more aggressive and re-signed him a year ahead of time. We all know that. But even if they decided, hey, we think he's going to decline and we're going to let him go, well, they could have gone out and gotten Dansby Swanson like the Cubs did, he's having a great year for them. They could have gone out and gotten one of these other shortstops that are really good. Instead, they chose to sign Trevor Story, which, yeah, sure, $140 million is a lot of money, but even that was the less aggressive path because he was going to be more affordable than some of these other guys.
KJ and Lyons, WEEI 617-779-7937. Text line 37937. 8 minutes away from a little montage of parodies, pretty much with Chaim Bloom in the center of the content of them. So the conversation now has shifted to, like, should Alex Cora be the next person in Chaim Bloom's seat? Here's Alex Cora.
That's something that's for the future. You know, my goal here is to keep playing good baseball and help these guys to get better. You know, everybody knows how I feel about this game, and you know, whatever decision we make in the future is based on my family and all that stuff. You know, I think it's, you know, right now, this is something that we have to talk. You know, as a group, what we want to do. You know, I talk a little bit with Tom and John and Sam after they talk to us, and you know, we just gotta focus on what we have to do right now. And you know, that today you saw a lot of good things, and we're pushing these guys to be great. So that's my main goal right now.
Yeah, Alex Cora, top 5 manager in baseball. Not sure if he's at that level of moving pieces and, you know,
is he a top 5 manager in baseball right now?
I think so. I
really
think so.
The reason I asked that, KJ, and look, I have a ton of respect for the guy, and I think what he did in 2018 was phenomenal. But when you see all the base running mistakes the Red Sox make, the fundamental defensive mistakes, and I know a large part of it is Bloom put a roster together that had Kike Hernandez at shortstop for most of the year, and guys out of position. But at what point does this fall on coaching and also the players themselves, like not knowing fundamentals? Like, what did you work on in spring training? What did you work on all offseason? So don't get me wrong. I think Bloom, it was time for a change.
Management hasn't worked out this mess that's going on behind the scenes, and nobody seems to really be in charge. So if I make a base running error, depending on if I'm on side A or side B, I'm not going to get called out on it.
But that's part of the problem. Like, if you're the manager of the team, that is the on-field. Like, if you get a bad roster, and how many times have we heard him say the roster is the roster, which we know is a slap right at Bloom and management. But when you get that roster that is the roster, you still should get them to perform at the best level they can. And I think he hasn't done that this year, and I don't think he did it in 2019 either. Now, in 18 he did, in 2021 he did, but I think when you look at the blame for where the Red Sox are right now, ownership deserves a big chunk of it, Chaim Bloom deserves a big chunk of it, but I think there is a smaller chunk, in fairness, a smaller chunk that goes on Cora and the players that are here.
But I think you think back at, because what was it, the year that he sat out, 2020?
Yeah,
right. That he had
Ron Renneke as manager.
Right. So that's the season you can really kind of throw out, like if you're looking at a test. Right. It's pandemic year. Your regular manager's not there. So again, I think Chaim got enough time to establish that this is his ball club, and what he put together was not major league upper level quality play.
He also did sit out 2020 though because he got caught cheating. That was also his fault. It's not like he got hurt or there was some issue. Like, he got sat down because he got caught cheating.
Right, so, but that's a Major League Baseball thing. So if anything, that is your chance to really take over and put in people that are going to say, okay, while you were gone, I built you a roster. It didn't happen.
Right, but my point, and again, I think Cora is a good manager, and I actually would be kind of intrigued to see him in Chaim Bloom's role, much like we saw Brad Stevens with the Celtics go up to Danny Ainge's role. But I do think, again, him and the players deserve some blame for that. I feel like they're skating on this, and everyone's looking at, okay, Bloom put together a bad roster, and ownership doesn't want to spend, which are true, and those are by far the biggest reasons. But when you have guys, you lose a game to the Toronto Blue Jays in August because a player leaves second base when they're not supposed to on a flyout, that's not you're a Major League Baseball player. There's mistakes like that. It feels like happening all the time. And
I would argue, how does that guy get on the roster? Right? If that guy has it in him to do that, then how is that guy on the roster?
Sure, and that's why I said Chaim Bloom deserves in ownership the most blame. But at some point, what are you working on in spring training? What are you coaching? I think Cora is terrific when you have a veteran club that guys know what they're doing, and he's just got to manage personalities and playing time. We saw it in 2018. We saw it in 2021. I don't know if he's as good with teams that are either younger, which there are younger pieces on the Sox, or just not built to be high-end contenders, which obviously they aren't be. So I would keep Cora as manager if they're going to be aggressive this offseason and put a real contender together.
KJ and Lyons, WEEI, 617-779-7937. Text line 37937. Red Sox conversation continues. Join in. Right now, time to trend with Joe Braverman.